Welcome to this week's episode of the Hero Academy podcast. I am very excited to have my friend Gene, Ph.D. Do you like when people call you doctor?
No,
Doctor?
I hate it. It makes me
You hate
cringe.
it. You are definitely top four, top five most interesting human beings that I've had on the podcast. I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
No zero platitudes when I say that. But before I hit record, I was telling you about my son and his dream. And my youngest son, my baby boy, 23 years old, wants to fight in the UFC. And my biggest concern is definitely injury, concussions. I don't want his brain chemistry to change. You know, he's a sweet kid. He's patient. He's nice. And when he first told me this, I'm like, "You're not a killer." I'm like, "You want to be?" And I also said, "You didn't have a rough life." Like when I imagine a fighter, he had a really good life. I gave him a solid. Our career provides for a very stable. If you're not a drunk, right? If you're not a
Sure.
drunk and
Sure.
you're not a drug addict, it provides for a very stable life for your families, right? I worked a lot of overtime. I crushed it when I was in uniform. I worked a lot. But I was always there for all of their sporting events. Um, I had great bosses that would let me cut out an hour earlier too, because they always said family first. And I honestly say to this day, I had 90% of my bosses were great boss. You're a sergeant, right?
Yep, Sergeant. I was just gonna say, like, family first. I've heard people say that and then not carry it out on the other end. So if
Yep,
you have people that actually said family first and then let you go to those events,
yep.
that's great. That's actual leadership. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
you go up and you say, "Hey, boss, my son is wrestling, or my son he's in a tournament. Is it all right if I leave an hour early today?" And 99% of the time, I never had an issue from any of my boys. Even this one guy who was like an old school hard ass was like, "Yeah, no problem." And he was like one of the worst bosses I ever had. So so you also have to know which ones to ask, right? You have to know like you have to say you can't ask every week unless it's a season, right? Like sometimes there's a wrestling season and it's the next 2 months, and I would say, "Hey, boss, for the next 2 months, on Fridays I need to leave. Every other week I need to leave early, something like that." And they usually don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and
But
just to that, just to like like, let's say you are asking every week, right? But I don't know you that well, but I know you well enough to know that you're going to be making deposits into that bank leading up to that. So you're not just going to keep like taking and taking and taking. Like,
right,
no, you're probably a rock star cop who does a
right,
lot of awesome things so that when you go to ask for this, it's not even a big deal. It's like, well, he's been killing it out there. Like, yeah, I'll give him this hour or whatever. It's a no big deal. But if you're
yeah.
just a slum and you never do anything, and then you're asking for these things, you're almost like, no, no, you're not getting that.
So back to my son, he that's his dream to fight in the UFC, and I tell everyone that will listen that I don't I support him in his dream, but and everyone else I talk to, he'll probably he doesn't listen to podcasts, but his girlfriend does from time to time, so she might pass on the word. But I don't want that for him. What I wanted for him was for him to become a police officer because I feel like he has the right temperament for it. I was just telling his girlfriend's mom that he's calm, he's patient, he's physically fit. Like he looks like a beast. He's 23 years old, right?
Mhm.
He's jacked. One set five, 5'7.5", 5'8" at 170, muscle, all muscle. Thick legs and big shoulders, and he looks great. And I know that he would be fair and empathetic with people, and he had a great childhood. My kids will be the first to tell you that I was a good dad because my dad wasn't around, right?
Right.
So I strived extra hard to be a good dad, and I poured on the love. And yes, I was disciplinarian and kind of strict with some things, but my biggest concern was when they went to high school and pills, because that's when pills started getting popular.
Yep.
So it's just like, please don't ever do pills. And now, and a lot of the heroin addicts that used to be athletes, they started with pills, pain pills. You're in PA, right?
Delaware.
Oh, Delaware. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
What's the big how many years you got on total?
So total in policing is about 15 and then 13 here in Delaware.
13 in Delaware.
Yeah.
What's the big drug issue? Because I know it's all across the country.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Delaware's always been heroin. Like honestly, like since the time I've been there, I never really saw a big cocaine crack. Like I kind of missed that whole generation. The entire time I've been involved in policing, it's been heroin
Mm,
for the lower income areas. And then, like you're like in northern Delaware, like the higher income areas, you definitely have like pills and stuff like that. But
yeah.
dude, listen, I can't tell you the amount of athletes that I know that had an injury, got
Yes.
hooked on pills,
Yes.
couldn't afford the pills anymore, and then went to heroin. It's like now it's just like a tale as old as time. I mean,
I
and
know, and that was my
tragedy.
biggest fear with him getting any injuries. I always told him like, please be careful of the pain pills because they're so addictive. And the doctors will give you 100 opioids at a clip.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, dude,
No problem.
I had a very minor surgery when I was 15 years old. And they prescribed me Percocet, and my mom's a nurse, and she yoked those away from me like immediately. Not because she thought that like I would abuse them, but why would you even take the risk? I didn't need them. I really didn't. I just needed some extra strength Tylenol, and I was fine. But as a 15-year-old kid, like that's how that starts.
Yeah, I love that your mom was a nurse. What did your dad do?
He's a school teacher, so he's a gym teacher.
So no law enforcement in your family?
So I have a cousin who works for the prosecutor's office in Cape May County, New Jersey. He he actually he was the only guy in my family, but honestly, they lived kind of far away, so we never really talked to them that much. But no, I was kind of the outcast, if you will. Like my sister's a teacher, my dad's a teacher, my mom's a nurse, and I just wanted to do something different. Really, I mean, now the cops that I knew, like from a local around where I lived, they were athletes, man. They were like jacked athletes, and I always loved working out, and they always seemed to be like doing well for themselves. You know what I mean? Like making decent money.
Right.
Uh, Heard them talk about the pension, all that kind of stuff, and I was like, I think that's for me. I think that's what I want to do.
How
And it was,
old were you when you made that decision?
dude, I was 16. I was
Wow.
16 when I really made that decision. I went for a ride along with a local chief of police, and I was hooked immediately.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing about Jersey is they have these seasonal police officer positions. So I was a class 2 officer down in Wildwood, New Jersey. I did that for 2 summers. The greatest 2 summers of my life, even now looking back, as far as policing goes. And yeah, I was 18 years old when I went through my first police academy in Jersey.
You ever worked at convention center in Wildwood?
Yeah, we used to like hop around there from time to time, but I worked the Boardwalk my first summer. So that was, let me think. That was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. That was my shift. And then the second summer I worked what's called like the bar district, and
Yeah.
that was 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And I loved
Okay.
it. Oh my
Okay.
God, it
Yeah,
was
when you're a young
incredible.
man, when you're a young man working those hours, they're like the greatest thing in the world.
Yep. Yep. I can remember like because the boardwalk would shut down, let's say it would shut down at 10 o'clock at night. Well, from 10 to 2, we would leave the boardwalk basically. We weren't supposed to, but we would. And then we would just go patrol like those other streets on foot. And we would get into so much shit just as 18, 19-year-old kids. And it was like the wild, wild west. I mean, and looking back on it, my supervisor really was a guy who was just like 1 year ahead of me. It
Mm,
wasn't even a sergeant or a corporal. There was a corporal who was in charge of all of us, but there was like 35 of us. There was no way you were going to keep track of all of us on one night. So it was,
35 under one supervisor.
yeah, there was like an entire, so that whole night, there would just be a bunch of us class twos out there all over the place. And we would have like a briefing, and the corporal would be basically tell us, like, hey, don't get in trouble. Don't do anything stupid. And we didn't, like, we were responsible, but looking back on those days, it's like, man, number
There
one,
was a,
good thing we didn't have body cameras, like that kind of stuff.
but
But
there could have been an element of disaster, like just
yes,
easily.
easily. But I mean, we did our job, and we had a good time.
Were you carrying like full-fledged police officers or
Yeah.
peace officers?
Now, full fledged, we carried a 45. I mean, it was funny. The only caveat was we couldn't take the gun home. So
Okay,
we had to put it in our locker at the end of the night and then go be regular people. And then we would come back and check it out of our locker.
that's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
then, what did you do after that? What was the next step in your career, next
So then
phase?
I was totally hooked, right? I was like, this, okay, law enforcement, 100% for me. I was in college and my mom and both my dad, they really were stressing me like, hey, we really want you to finish college. And I was in my second year of college, I think. And I just applied to every state police organization, like on the entire East Coast. And Maryland State Police picked me up. So then I went to Maryland State Police, went through their academy, which was phenomenal, made a lot of great relationships there, and stayed there for 2 years. I was stationed down in Salisbury. Again, another great experience. Like Maryland State Police, super squared away. Had a lot of great supervisors there. A lot of the lessons, a lot of the like my leadership style now is based off those early days from those guys because it's different from where I'm at now. So, especially down in Salisbury, it was at the time it was the busiest barrack in the state, and you were kind of like a one-man show. I mean, your backup was not coming anytime soon. So you had to, as a 21-year-old man at the time, I say man like jokingly, I was still a kid.
Right.
You had to be very confident in your abilities, but I had great supervisors. So then I actually wound up leaving Maryland State Police. I met my wife, who we live in New Jersey now. And that was just a family decision, to be honest with you. Like, we knew we wanted to start having kids. She's from New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. Our families are from here. So I found out about Newcastle County Police, where I'm at now, and nothing against New Jersey, but I really, at the time, they were switching their pensions over to this 30-year pension thing, and that didn't really sound too appealing to me. So I found Newcastle County Police, where you can live wherever you want. It's a really good sized department, about 415 sworn officer strength,
Yeah.
and kind of been there ever since for the last 13 years.
I wasn't gonna ask what agency you work for, but I guess you've been on so many podcasts now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
out there. It doesn't really
It's
matter.
it's free publicity for them, and they like it. So
Yeah, and a lot of departments are having a hard time recruiting. So you being on podcasts and talking about your department being a great department. I work for a really great department too, on Long Island, which I won't name, but most people know that to work on Long Island, it's all they're all great, all of them.
yeah.
Um, so your parents both being educators, they stressed education
Mhm.
because you're kind of an anomaly. Not many people go on to the level that you've gone on to.
Yeah, that's because
Oh, oh.
I'm a psycho. But yeah.
So so you get your associates and then you get your bachelor's, or you went straight for the bachelor's?
So I had my associates. So you have to have your associates to get hired by where I'm at now with the county police. But I didn't go back to school for about 5 years into my career. So I did a few years on the road, and then I went into detectives. So I spent 7 years in our detective division, did everything from property to major crimes to homicide, did all those things. Well, I
Wow.
was like no, I think yeah, I was about 3 years into detectives, and I had not been promoted to sergeant yet. And I had somebody come to me within the department, and they basically just said, like, hey, you seem very squared away. However, you're missing like a big part of this thing, dude. Like, you got to go back to school because you're never going to move up here. Call it what you want, but it is what it is unless you get educated. So I then started talking to a couple people. Even that didn't really push me over the edge. And then that chief of police that I did the ride along with when I was 16, he was still the chief of police at this time. I'm about 25, 26 years old. So then I had a conversation with him, and he basically said the same thing. He was like, yeah, Gene, listen, like, if you really want to become in these leadership positions, you're going to have to go get educated. So I took that as, all right, well, what's the highest level of possible education you can get, which is a PhD. So I went from having an associate's degree to a PhD in about 8 years it took me. So I just went straight through. I got a bachelor's degree. Yeah, then got my
Incredible.
master's in education, and then did the PhD. So I kind of just finished up about a year and a half ago.
Oh my God. So with your master's and with the PhD, you can teach pretty much anywhere in the country.
Yeah. Yep.
So that is one of the things about education that you'll always have that element of you can teach and you have the real life experience of being an investigator for, you said 7 years?
Yeah, so I was a detective for 7 years, yeah. And I've been in as an investigator, as a supervisor, because now I'm in internal affairs. I know everybody hates me in internal affairs, not really, but I've been there for 3 years. So really, it's 10 years of actual like investigations.
Have you met Marlon Marachi? I think that's how you say his last name. I had him on the podcast. He's from LA, and I'll link you guys together.
Yeah,
He's
please do.
very passionate about it, and that's all he talks about is his IA. And I had him on the show, but I'll definitely link you guys together. You need the right people in IA. You definitely need the right people
Yeah,
because
I'll tell you what, like when I first got the phone call, so I got a phone call about 3 years ago. I had been a sergeant for a couple years. And the phone call was it came from a major at the time, and they were basically like, "Hey, would you be interested in going into internal affairs?" And I said no.
everyone says no. Everyone says no at first.
Yep. And then they were like, "Would you be interested in going into internal affairs?" I was like, "Oh, okay. I see what kind of phone conversation this is." So I accepted it, and it's not what I thought it was going to be. Like I've had a great time in there, and all the trainings that I've had a chance to go to, all the Force Science Institute, all the human factors training, all that kind of stuff, dude, it's totally taken me on a 180 as far as how I look at rapidly evolving situations that police officers get put in. And I love it. I really do. And also, like, I make a point, we're a decent sized department. Like I said, we got about 400 officers. I really make it a point to not like be a politician, but I try to spend as little time in the office as I can. And I'm out and about, dude. I'm high-fiving people, shaking hands, kissing babies, trying to talk to people like as much as I can. I do jujitsu with guys like outside of work, like all that kind of stuff, just so that when the time comes and I got to call you in for an investigation, like
You're a
it's not this
human,
big awkward thing. You know what I mean?
right? Right. You're a human
Yes.
doing human being things. You're being a human instead of a robot who works in an ivory castle and no one ever sees him until the grand wizard opens the curtain and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my
And
God, this is gonna
our building is set up that way. So our building, it's 3 stories. So if you go up the elevator to the third floor, you get off the elevator to the right, behind like this glass one way, you can only see out, you can't see in. That's where internal affairs in. It's like this, the only reason you would ever go there is if you're in trouble. You know what I
yes.
mean? So yeah, you're totally nailed it.
I only had two internal affairs investigations. One was for myself. I mean, complaints I've had maybe a handful, half, uh, definitely not two hands, but definitely I've had, I like to say less than 10 complaints. And where I actually got called in, it was for someone else's investigation where I was the lead detective on the case, and I had the arrest room directly across from me. So they're like, "You had eyes on the room the entire time?" I said, "Yes, sir, the entire time. I had eyes on the room." And I can say with 100% certainty that no one went into that room. And 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 then I also asked at the end of the interview, I said, "Well, who is he accusing of hitting him?" And he said a white male with like a short cropped hair. And I was like, "Phew, that's not me."
All right, not me.
I'm like, all right, that eliminates me. Okay, good. All right, good. So I can relax now. So
Yeah,
that was
very early on in my career with the county, I got called into internal affairs. I wound up getting disciplined actually. It wasn't anything crazy, but I had a good experience. I know that sounds crazy, but I remember going in there, I was scared to death because I was about 6 months off FTO, maybe a year off
yeah.
field training, getting called into internal affairs, and I wound up getting disciplined. It was nothing crazy. I think it was a written reprimand at the time. But again, great experience. They treated me with respect. And I was totally in the wrong. I was, and I was honest about it. And that was it. And that, like, they never held it against me. It was just one of those things where, hey, he's a young kid. He made a mistake. We dealt with it. He got some retraining. But I never forgot that. I never forgot how I felt going into internal affairs. Like, I was terrified. So now I still think about that today. Like, I make sure when officers come in, number one, I always make sure I'm in a shirt and tie. I make sure I look good, I'm looking presentable, and I make sure to like have a conversation with them and kind of bullshit with them before they come in, just kind
Yes.
of lower that.
Yeah, that's how it was when my last interview was the one I was referencing. They definitely I knew that I'd done nothing wrong, so I went into that one not scared at all, not worried. I'm like, okay, I'm not really worried about this. But the number one rule across the country is do not lie to internal affairs. That
Yeah,
is the number one rule that I want anyone that's listening to this, and I know you concur. Do not tell a lie. It's worse than lying on the stand.
it is. Yeah. Yeah, that's the only thing I can't help you out with. If you come in and lie, it's just, and especially I can't talk for all the other internal affairs investigators, but we're not trying to play like a gotcha game. It's
Right.
not. We're very open. And in Delaware, so Delaware has a very robust officers' Bill of Rights. I mean, the officers, rightfully so, have a lot of rights. So, yeah, when we call them in for an interview, it's very direct and to the point. I'm not trying to figure out your deepest, darkest secrets. And yeah, you just tell the truth. And luckily, in my 3 years, we've never had that problem.
What was your favorite unit that you worked in, or favorite capacity?
Homicide, for sure.
Homicide. How
Yeah,
long
I
were
got to
you
work
in
with a
that
lot of
role?
really great investigators. We kind of had this crew. There was about 4 to 6 of us that kind of came into detectives around the same time, and then we kind of kept moving up to these different units all together. So by the time we got to homicide together, we all knew each other very well. And I definitely was not the best investigator. Like those guys were definitely better than me, but I got to learn so much from them. I got to work a lot of just awesome cases. Um, yeah, and I went through a couple actual full-blown homicide trials, which very stressful, but man, I learned so much. The trial process, especially if you're dealing with a homicide. The last homicide trial I had, it was a 15-year-old female that had been murdered, and then another gentleman. And man, the pressure that I felt during that to make sure that this guy gets convicted, and that was really stressful. And I learned so much about that process. And I think that's why I'm able to talk about investigations through this lens of like, dude, I've been there, I've made the mistakes, been through the trials. Listen, I've been up on the stand before and been made to look like a complete idiot. And the when that happens, it feels terrible, but it's like the best thing that could ever happen to you. Hopefully not
Because
during a homicide. Hopefully not during a homicide trial where it
right,
ruins the case,
right.
but you need those things to happen.
Defense attorneys will actually open your department's rules and procedures. And if you didn't do X when your rules and procedures say you're supposed to execute it this way, they will bring that out. And you better have a good excuse for why you deviated from the rules and procedures. What's your department's, is that what it's called, rules and procedures, or do they have a different name for it?
We just have like directives. We just call it directives.
Directives. Yeah,
Mhm.
so they will bring out, they have access to those, and they will bring them out, and they say, your directive says that you're supposed to do this first. Is there a reason why you did not do this first? Please explain to us, officer.
Oh,
Or
it's funny. It's funny you just said that. So a buddy of mine, he's now with the FBI. He left, but when we were young officers coming up, he had, I think it was a robbery case, and he asked me to do a photo lineup for him for that case. Now he did what he was supposed to do because I had no involvement in that case. So that's how our policies and directives mandate that whoever
blind.
does, yeah, yep, whoever does the photo lineup can have no knowledge about the case whatsoever, right? So I go and do this photo lineup, and I did it like in our lobby. You're supposed to do it in an interview room. You're supposed to record it, all this stuff. Well, I didn't know that because I was a young officer. So I just did it in the lobby. Now that was recorded, but the guy positively ID'd him. So they got some other evidence and they wound up arresting the guy. Well, this goes to trial. So the defense attorney calls me up on the stand and does exactly what you just said, right? So she says, is there a, like, why is it in your policy that this should be recorded when you do this? And my answer was, well, so people can't lie about it and they can't just make something up. So it's recorded. And her rebuttal was, well, did you record it? And I was like, no, I didn't. But it just started down that rabbit hole of,
Yep.
well, what's he hiding? Is he hiding something? Why didn't he do it?
Their
So,
number one job is to make the investigator look bad.
yes. But I can tell you this, I never didn't record a photo lineup after that. I learned
Yeah,
from that experience and made the best of it.
you learn from mistakes.
Hmm.
I told you when we last spoke that I would love to just ride around your district, your area with you, and we still may make that happen because you're not very far from me.
Yeah.
So that's just my dream of like where I'm going to take the podcast, and I don't mind saying it because if you ever listen to my intro, I don't mind. Uh, I don't really believe in competition. No one else can be my voice. No one else can have my backstory. And you have an amazing story to be so young and so much experience, so many different units. Like you have a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really glad that you're continuing to teach. We last spoke about you going and speaking at conferences. How did you decide to start speaking? Like where did that decision come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually went to so there's this nonprofit that a buddy of mine runs. It's called Consequences of Habit. His name is JT Frank. He's a U.S. Air Marshal. So he's had this nonprofit for a while, right? Many years. So he put on this like speaker event. Well, at the speaker event, there's this guy. His name's Nick Lavery. Nick Lavery is a Green Beret who's larger than life. He's like 6'6", 280 pounds. He's actually missing one of his legs. One of his legs got blown off in combat, but he's still an active Green Beret. Anyway, this guy goes up and starts speaking. And this is back in September, October of last year. And basically his speech is motivational. It's like, what are you doing with your life? All that kind of stuff. But it really touched me. Like I really felt like he was speaking to me. So I've always, listen, I've actually always enjoyed public speaking. I think it came from being a detective and interviewing people and just when you interview people, especially for violent crimes, you got to be pretty good at just being working off the cuff and just talking and getting to know people and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed that. And then I had been promoted to sergeant, and I had always thought to myself, like, I bet I could do this. I bet I could talk to people and learn, get these leadership lessons out to people. But I had this little thing in the back of my mind that was like, well, you're just like a little peon. Like you're just a sergeant. And maybe when you're a lieutenant or a captain, maybe then you can start thinking about doing that. So then I hear Nick Lavery talking about this, and that was just the trigger that I needed. So then I started my own company. I started Reid Training Solutions and just kind of propelled from there and just said, you know what, listen, okay, I'm only a sergeant. All right, whatever. I got 10 years of investigative experience. I have a PhD. I've written a book about emotional intelligence. Like I
I'd
know what
say
I'm
I'd say you're qualified.
right, right. But it's funny, like it took me a while to actually like believe that and think that
Yes.
myself. I had to have a total mindset shift, but now I do. Now I'm in it. Now I'm more confident than ever. So then I just started kind of putting it out into the universe, right? Just started the company, started putting things out on social media, and then people started to see it and they're like, yeah, this dude looks super qualified. We should probably get him to come teach us some things. And that's
Yes.
kind of how it started.
If I had a conference, I would absolutely have you be one of the speakers because I meant it when I said you're top four, top five most interesting human beings that I've, and it's not even like you have some crazy wild story. It's just the wealth of experience and the education. You combine those things, and then the book title. What's the title of the book?
Yeah, it's called Police Leadership Redefined, the EQ Advantage, and it's all about emotional intelligence. So that's like that's the thing that I love the most right now about leadership is this concept of emotional intelligence. And I'll just give you a quick kind of 2-minute explanation of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, there's 4 pillars to it, and it is self-awareness, which is you as an individual knowing yourself, which my God, I could give you an 8-hour presentation on that in and of itself. But the next part is self-management, knowing how to manage your emotions. The third part is social awareness. Kind of like I said, like when you're an investigator and you're interviewing people, are you able to pick up on other people's emotions? Are you able to pick up and relate to other people, have empathy and those kind of things? And then the final part is relationship management. And to me, that framework that I just laid out, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and managing your own relationships, any situation that you give me in leadership, I can apply it to one of those pillars, and that's all emotional intelligence. So when you find somebody who is like a really great leader, 99 times out of 100, it's because they have a high level of emotional intelligence.
Mm, that's really good. I definitely want to look into that. I told you I never took any promotional exams. My plan when I was on midnights was to go back to the academy, be academy instructor for a few years, and then study to make supervisor. But then I got on the investigative track where I went into a community unit, and then I wanted to go to narcotics and become a detective that way, and then maybe work in some different units. But my career didn't go that way. It went it went, hey, you're getting promoted and you're going to special victims. And I said, oh, okay. So I was there for close to 3 years, and then I went to the General Detective Squad, where I've been, and my story is all about being burnt out and you know, I call it death by a thousand cuts because you get so many grand larcenies of cars and credit cards that it does eventually burn you out. And I told my supervisor, I'm like, I need some change. I wanted to go to the administrative spot. I would do anything different. And eventually you have to decide, well, if they're not going to move you, then how are you going to reinvent yourself? What are you going to do? You have to take responsibility for your own career at some point. So I started the podcast and I started speaking myself also. Your story of how you got the conference is pretty amazing. The one that you're doing in October, you told me you picked up the phone and you just cold called, which
Yeah.
so few people do.
I think no, so I signed a contract with the state of Virginia, so I have a few different presentations I'm doing with them, but that came through the grapevine. Like some people heard about me, and then somebody told somebody about me, and then and then somebody from Virginia reached out to me. But all the other ones that I'm doing, so I have 3 different events in May that I'm doing. All of them were cold calls. I just like reach out to people, and you'd be surprised how well that works. And I think it's because not many people do it. So when
I,
you get somebody that actually, for lack of a better term, like has the guts to actually do that, I think people see like, oh, okay, this dude's pretty passionate about this. And
yeah.
uh, and again, it comes back to like this investigative background, like having the ability to interview people. I just can talk to people on the phone and I can bullshit with people. And then before you know it, they're like, would you like to talk at our conference? I'm like, I would love to.
And they do that without seeing you speak previously.
So I have 4 or 5 videos on YouTube right now. So I have a podcast. It's called The Science of Self-Development. I don't do it that often, but I made sure to have some videos of me, like 10, 15-minute clips of me actually talking and presenting. But that was like a strategic move for exactly what you just said. Because it's one thing to hear somebody talk on the phone, but then if you can actually see me giving a presentation on something, and I have a decent flow.
Right.
And actually, you know what? So it's funny you bring that up to add to all the other things that I do, but I started writing articles for Police One, right? And I did that a while ago. I've just always really enjoyed writing. And again, that was just a shot in the dark. I wrote an article. I sent it to police one, didn't hear anything for about 5 months, and was like, well, I guess I'll never be published. And then like 5 months goes by and they reach out and they say, hey, we love your article. So then I developed a relationship with them. So I've written 4 or 5 different times for them. So then again, I kind of did the cold call thing. So they were going to publish one of my articles, right? And I had done a video basically of that article. It was on paradigms and habits and how to build good habits in your life, right? So then I reached out to them and I was kind of nervous about doing it, but I was like, let me take a chance. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, you guys are going to publish this article that I wrote. I actually have a video that goes along with it. Would you be willing to put that video in the article when you put it online? So again, like a month goes by and I didn't hear anything. So I'm like, oh shit, like they're not going to do it. Well, then they come back and they're like, dude, this is awesome. Well, then like a week goes by and they're like, hey, would you be willing to do a 10-part video series for us on leadership? But all of that happened because they actually got to see me present and do it, right? It wasn't just like me talking to them saying like, hey, I do these presentations and I'm really good. It's like, well, here's the evidence that you can look at for yourself.
Right.
But also going back to what you talked about earlier, I don't know how many people just reach out to them and say like, "Hey, would you be willing to do this?" And just take a shot in the dark. Who knows? What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people are afraid of rejection. We have a mutual friend in Monty Bynum. I saw he posted about you. So how did you link up with him?
So Monty, I don't actually remember. Maybe Monty reached out to me, maybe I reached out to him. I don't remember the exact way it happened, but he used to work for our police department.
Okay,
So where I work, Monty used to work, 20 years ago, however long it was.
right.
I never met him on the job, but everything that I'm talking about with the mindset stuff,
Yes.
Monty and Amy, who is also part of his company, The Wealthy Servant, they're the ones that kind of like grabbed me by the shoulders and they were like, "Hey, dummy, like you have all the things you could ever need. You just have to change your mindset."
Right.
And that was a big stepping stone for me to be like, oh, okay, like I have the resume. Now it's just a matter of me being confident with that. But Monty, he's a wizard with that stuff because, he's been a first responder for almost as long as I've been alive
And been in business for a
and
long
been a
time as well.
businessman, right? And that's, you know what, and I did a video for Police One today, and I kind of talked about this, and Monty's really the one that turned me on to this. Like, stop asking yourself how you can do things and just ask who can help you, right?
Yes.
So Monty's a businessman. That dude knows how to make money and he knows how to really get the most out of other people. I don't know how to do that. I'm fairly good at speaking. I know how to investigate things, like I have that. I don't know how to make it into a business. I don't know how to make money off of it. And Monty does. So I partner with him and I've been working with him ever since.
That's incredible. That's awesome. I love our conversations. I talk with him about once a week, and I definitely will be partnering with him in some capacity as well. Um, I definitely tell people to look into what he's doing because he's a shining example of creating a training company around whatever it is that your skill is. Like, I believe your training company could be worth $1 million a month easily. If you put the right pieces in place and you continue to speak and market yourself, the word's going to get out. It
Hmm.
it has to. You're putting out good content out into the world, and people are going to start to like the next time I have a conversation with a meeting planner about a conference, I'm going to say, I know a PhD who happens to be in law enforcement. I'm going to say, you need to connect with this guy,
Yeah.
and that's what happens is people start to know who you are and word starts to spread and your brand becomes a, multi-million dollar brand all of a sudden, like, oh, they call it an overnight success over, 20 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not gonna. I appreciate that. Was very nice of you to say. I do appreciate that. It's not gonna be overnight. I can tell you that. But uh, but I've definitely had like positive reinforcement, right, for some of these things, like stepping outside of my comfort zone. And yeah, listen, I've definitely certainly had failures. Like Like I tried to do things a certain way, like, well, that didn't work out. Okay, well, we're just going to try a different way.
It's all an experiment, right?
Yes,
It's
it's
all an
all,
experiment.
yeah, absolutely. But it's amazing to me how much of it just comes down to that mindset. You know what I mean? Like there are people who, and I'm just going to say it, their resumes are far less impressive than mine, but because they have the confidence and because they have the mindset, they're crushing it, right?
Yep.
And I applaud them and I think that's incredible. Like good for them. That's really awesome. Now it's my turn to go do that, right? But the only difference is the mindset. That's it.
Who were some of your mentors outside of law enforcement, like in terms of mindset? Because one of my early mentors was Bob Proctor. You had mentioned Paradigms, and
Yeah.
I went to see him in Toronto, and I became one of his consultants. I purchased like every program he had.
Yeah. Dude, no,
Who,
Bob Proctor. So Bob Proctor and Earl Nightingale, those are
yeah.
my two top tier. Bob Proctor's book, Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life, was like that was a big shift for me.
For me,
And
his book, You Were Born Rich,
mm,
was a big shift for me. I read that one, and it's not about making money, it's about using your faculties that you're born with. And uh, I always recommend people to read that book because he breaks it down so simply. I just, I grew up on Bob Proctor.
yeah, yeah, I just got introduced to Bob Proctor, I would say a few years ago. But yeah, man, just and again, he's all about mindset, right? He's all about you can literally do whatever you want to do. And I know that sounds very corny, but it's the truth. As long as you are willing to kind of open yourself up and try new things, man, it's just now that I almost feel like I was stuck in the matrix for so many years, right? And now I've kind of like seen the other side. And I'm like just on the surface. Like there's a whole nother side that I haven't even seen yet. But I almost look back at where I used to be and how a lot of people are just stuck in this mindset, this like limiting non-growth mindset. And I'm just like, oh man, you're really missing it. Like you could do so much more.
There's so many people who believe that they don't have any other skills other
Mhm.
than their career that they've been attached to. They've taken on this identity of a fireman or of a police officer, and that's that they feel like that's all that they know. So how do you suggest someone start to shift away from that mindset, or just start to go in a direction of growth? How do you suggest
Yeah,
they do
start
it?
reading books. There's people out there who will tell you exactly how to do it. And you and I have both told the audience, like Bob Proctor is a phenomenal way to start that. Bob Proctor does a great job at just breaking things down in very simple terms, relating it to your life. Every book I've ever read by Bob Proctor, I feel like he wrote it for me, right? And that's why he was so successful in doing those things. I had this conversation with Monty, and this is when him and I first started working together. But if you look at first responders, you nailed it in the sense of most first responders identify with whatever that position is. I am a police officer, I am a firefighter, I am a paramedic, whatever. And they really don't think that they're anything more than that. They just think that, oh, I can't do that. I'm just a cop or whatever. But take a second to think about the skills and attributes that a police officer has. Police officers make split-second decisions in rapidly evolving situations. And most of the time, like the overwhelming majority of the time, they're 100% right and they do it awesome.
Natural
Whereas,
problem solvers.
yes, yes, correct. Police officers and really just first responders in general are phenomenal problem solvers, but they don't even realize that that's this skill that they've been developing over years. Well, guess what everybody else in their life wants? They want somebody to fix their problems. And that could be the business world. Like my cousin works in the finance world, right? And they have a lot more time to think about decisions. And what I'm noticing now is they like to have military and police personnel come in and talk about leadership because military and police, you got to make decisions very quickly with very little information, and you better be right. Because especially now, if you're not, you're going to be in trouble. So it's just identifying. And I think one of the things that I did, and this is what Monty told me to do, is just write down like what are the things you do on a daily basis. Like just seriously, just write it down. And if you're a police officer, like write down all the calls for service you went to that day. What are all the different problems you had to solve? You know, you had to drive really fast to a scene, you had to render first aid to somebody. And then if you take a step back and look at that, you're like, oh shit. Like this is pretty incredible that I did this all in one day. And then that's just, you know, you got to educate yourself though too, because man, I'm telling you, if I could really one piece of information, read Bob Proctor's books. It's the truth. I mean, that dude has kind of like solved the puzzle for a lot of people.
He was my first mentor that told me to write a book. He said, "You have a book inside of you." So I actually took him literally, went home, and I did it the hard way. I sat down and wrote 1 page a day. I would go and they say if you copy everything from one book, you're plagiarizing, right? But if you copy from a dozen books, you're doing research. Have you ever heard that quote before?
No, I haven't, but that's really good.
Yeah, so obviously anyone with a PhD or a master's, they are very familiar with doing research from
Yeah.
multiple books, right? And you just have to quote your sources, right? So
Mhm.
I would just go and I would have like my 6 or 7 favorite books, and I would go through and look, see what I highlighted, and then I would write that piece down that I highlighted, and then I would continue on it and write my own thoughts from that.
Mm.
And that was my method. And I could spit out a page or two a day, and over the course of, I think it took me like 9 months, I was able to complete my first book. That's the really, really difficult way. Do you know the easy way now?
No, tell me, what's the easy way?
I'm going to tell you the easy way, and I helped someone from Maryland with this same concept. So this is the easy way for anyone that's listening that wants to do their book. You have someone interview you like this. So you fill out an outline, you fill out your big idea. You worry about titles later, but you do your 10 points. Okay, this is, and you start off with your story. This is my story. It depends if you're writing a nonfiction book or if you're writing a fiction book, right?
Right.
But for a nonfiction book, you write, this is my story. This is the lesson that I want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not partake. This is the lesson that I want to give. What's the, what's a better word than give?
I don't know. I would just
Lead.
say a lesson learned for the book. I don't know.
Yeah, lesson learned. So each chapter you do a lesson learned and a story about that lesson. And you have someone interview you about that. You have that interview then transcribed,
Mm.
and then you send that to an editor to make it into a more readable format. You say, hey, I want this in a more readable format, closer to, a traditional book. And you don't read the transcription at all, because the transcription just reads like an interview and it just sounds hard. It doesn't sound like a book. But
Yeah.
you send it to an editor, then you get it back, and then you make your first revisions on it. And you say, okay, well, I think I want to expand on this, or I want to change this. This doesn't really sound as educated as I want to sound on the topic. So you may want to do a little more research on that particular chapter, and then add, oh yeah, there was a study on this, and I want to include this study. And then it's much less writing. You can get that done in a weekend versus 9 months. That's the fast way.
That's awesome. No, seriously, like I can't wait to go back and listen to this conversation because I'm going to do that for my next my
Yeah,
next book.
I
That's a
will.
great
I'll
idea.
send that. I'll send that to you in a text message, and I'll
Yeah.
send you like some other resources that I have, and you can get this done, and especially with Amazon Kindle publishing. You can
Yeah,
get this
that's what I
done
did. Yep.
for under a few $1,000s, and you can have it your second, third, and fourth book knocked out in probably a couple of months, instead of 9 months. You could probably do it in 60 days.
Yeah.
30 to 60 days. That's the really, really fast way. I've seen programs that say a book in a weekend, and I know exactly how they're doing it because I've talked to other consultants slash coaches who basically broke it down and told me this is how you knock out a book really, really fast. So writing the book is now the easy part. The harder part is marketing the book. You have to figure out, how are you going to let people know that you wrote this book, and how are you going to get it out? Do you have an email list yet?
I don't. So actually, so here's what I have. My website's being redone right now. So I made my own website. This is a great example of stop asking how to do things and just ask who. So my current website, I made it on Wix. It's fine, but it looks like I made the website.
Yeah.
And so I got hooked up with a web designer. They're currently working on that right now. And I will have basically every speaking presentation I go to in the future. When that speaking presentation is over, there will be a QR code that they can scan to get a free download of something, give a review of my presentation, something, something, and then I'll capture their emails through that.
Have you heard of Talkadot?
I have not, no.
So that's what they have. They have a QR code that, and I think the initial account is free, and if you upgrade, there's more features.
Right?
But they have this QR code that allows people to give feedback instantly, and you can also have your free download on that as well. So it's called Talk a Dot, ADOT.
Okay, cool.
Highly recommend that. And there was something else that you just mentioned. Oh, what's your website? What is it?
So by the time this comes out, it'll be readtrainingsolutions.com.
Retraining. And what was the old one? I'm just curious.
It
It
was
was,
readsolutionsllc.com.
oh, okay. Okay. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
cool.
So then
Yeah,
I
I'm,
even like even just that little thing, like my company used to be called Reed Solutions. Well, now it's called Reed Training Solutions.
yes,
So that was like a small, just kind of error on my part. Like I never even thought about that from a business standpoint. Like I just thought like, oh, this will be Reed Solutions. And then I started working with some people and they're like, solutions for what? Like
right.
what? Yeah. So then I had to refile my paperwork with the state and make it read training solutions now. But I enjoy this process. It's all part of the
Yes,
process. Like I'm just learning as I go. I'm going
yes.
to make those little mistakes and it is what it is.
I love that you're building the plane as you're flying. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like so, even with these speaking presentations, right? Like I reject this that I'll mess up like a major part of it, but I will probably give a 2 hour presentation. And then the seventh time I give that presentation, it'll be so different than the first time I gave it because I'm just going to keep building and building and building.
How
And
long
one
do
of
you
the,
practice? How long do you practice before, like, say you had something in a month from now, how many reps are you doing? How do you practice? What's your
yeah,
process
every day.
every day?
um, Pretty much all the way my brain works, I break everything down into 3 or 4 sections for everything, right? So if I'm giving a 2 hour presentation, that presentation will have 4 key parts to it. Each one of those parts will be about 30 minutes long, give or take, depending on how long like breaks will be for the presentation. But every single day, I am saying out loud that at least one section of that presentation. If it's and then as things get closer, I do the whole thing, like the whole shebang. You know what I mean? I just do it over and over and over again.
I
And I
love
do,
hearing other people's process because I
yeah.
I learn also.
Yeah, I'm a big repetition person. I've always been, I'll even give you another example. Like I'm in the middle of a promotional process right now for lieutenant. So I know I have my oral board coming up. The date hasn't been picked yet. It's going to be in the next month or so. But every time I'm in the car, I'm saying things out loud. Like I have a canned 3 to 5 minute thing that I want to say, right? But that thing's just like smooth. I mean, so no matter what stressful situation you put me in, it doesn't matter because I've said this thing 200 times already, and now it's just part of my whatever. So that's why I do that with so this thing I'm doing in Virginia, right? It's going to be the first week in June, and I think they said they're going to have me present in Richmond. Then I'm going to drive to Lynchburg, and then I'm going to drive to Virginia Beach and give an 8 hour presentation each one of those days. Well, that's a lot of like moving parts. There's a lot of things going on there. So the last thing that I want to have to worry about is the presentation. That presentation is going to be so locked down airtight that I'm not even thinking about that. You could even take away all my visual elements like God forbid something happened, right? And the projector wasn't working and they're like, oh, this doesn't work. I'm like, okay, whatever, we'll roll with it. But that comes through repetition, that comes through practice.
Did you ever record it and listen to it, or do you just continue to say it out loud?
So I record it and listen to it as well. So like right now I'm filming videos for that Police One video series, right? So like this morning before we recorded this, I recorded a video and I had rehearsed it in the days prior, right? So days leading up, and these are short videos. These are 5 to 7 minutes, somewhere around there. So I had been saying it out loud. I then go to record it. I record the session. It was like 6 minutes long. And then I watch it over again, right? And I just pick up on little things. I'm like, I want to tighten this up. I want to tighten that up. And then I'll just do it again and I'll do it again. I'm a little neurotic with it, to be honest with you, potentially to a fault, but I really like to just nail those things down. So listening to it is definitely, that's like the next level, I think. Say it out loud. I think, honestly, dude, where a lot of people go wrong is they don't say it out loud.
Mm.
They just think about it in their head
Or read it.
or read it. But there's a big difference between actually verbalizing it. There's some mechanism in the brain, I don't know what it is, but you actually saying it out loud is a whole nother game changer. And then if you record yourself, and then you can, when you ride around in your car, play it back to yourself, and then just listen to it.
I love that idea. That's one of my methods. I listen to myself a lot.
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite story that you tell during these trainings, or like with family?
I wouldn't say a favorite story. I have yeah, you want to hear a funny story about my daughter? I'll tell you a story. Sure. So this is the story that I give to provide the framework for emotional intelligence. All right. So I have two kids. My daughter is now almost 5. My son is almost 3. So this is about a year ago. So about a year ago, my daughter's 3 and my son's like 18 months old. He's about 2. So we're in the living room and my wife is cooking dinner in the kitchen. All right. So we're watching Paw Patrol. That's probably like before or after your time, but Paw Patrol was really big in my
I
house.
know what it is.
Yeah. All right, so we're watching Paw Patrol, and then my wife says, "Hey, dinner's ready." Okay, well, that's my cue as the dad to turn the TV off.
Right.
Right, so I get the remote. My son is walking by me because he knows the drill, like he's going to go to the dinner table. So then I extend my arm, have the remote, and I'm about to turn it off. My beautiful daughter, she gets up from the couch, looks at me, and says, "Drop it, fucker." Oh, so in that moment, I am frozen in time. I have this wave of emotions come over me. So this is emotional intelligence because first I have to be self-aware. First,
Right.
I have to think to myself, like, well, I'm really proud because now I know that my daughter is not going to take any bullshit from anybody.
Right.
But number two, where did she hear this? Because I don't say that word. I mean, I say the F word from time to time, but I've never used it in that context.
Right.
So next is self-management. Like I want to laugh, dude. I want to laugh so bad in that situation,
Right.
but I know I can't. I also want to look behind me at my wife and say, what's going on when I'm not here?
Are
Like,
you
how is it
saying are
possible?
you saying this?
Who's saying this? So then the next part is social awareness. I have my son who is totally frozen in time because he doesn't know what has happened, but he knows something has happened and dad's not very happy right now. And then the last part is relationship management. Like I know that how I handle this situation will forever change my relationship with my daughter, my son, my wife, the whole thing. So I just look at my daughter and I totally ignored it. I totally ignored it. I just turned the TV off, acted like it didn't happen, and then I went and sat down. And my wife and I were just looking at each other like, did that really just happen? But that, my friend, that's emotional intelligence. And all of that, that whole thing happened in probably 1.2 seconds. Like it's a split second when that happens. So
That is an
that's a story
incredible
that I tell.
story, and
Yeah.
I hope that if it's not in your current book, I hope it's in your next book.
It'll be in my
Because
next one. It's not in the last one.
yeah, that is an incredible story, whether it's told orally or whether it's written. That is just a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that one with my audience. Um, I'm going to respect your time because I know we're getting to that top of the hour now, not the top, but half hour.
Yeah.
Um, my last five questions for you, which I ask everyone, is what's your definition of a hero? Because people like to throw out that term for first responders and for military and for nurses, but I like to ask everyone. I promise that I won't call you that, but I like to ask my guest, what is your definition of a hero?
Yeah, somebody who's selfless, somebody who takes care of other people before taking care of themselves. I mean, I think that's for me, that's a true hero. Somebody who's truly selfless.
When your stress is starting to reach its high point because you were in homicide and also going to school at the same time, how did you save yourself from reaching that breaking point? How did you show yourself love, especially during those emotionally high times?
Yeah, that's a great question. Exercise, number one. So I found long distance, like endurance events, to be for me and my personality, my body, whatever you want to call it. Like long distance running is my thing. That's my therapy. I go for long distance runs. I don't listen to music. It's just me out on the road, and I just go do that. If I didn't have that, I'd be in an insane asylum. I really would. Like, I have to have that. And now during the homicide time, I wasn't doing jujitsu, but I recently got back into jujitsu. I've been doing that for about 2.5 years now. That's another one. So any type of strenuous physical activity, I think, is an absolute non-negotiable if you're going to mitigate your stress.
I could not agree more. I tell every single person that when I was under the most amount of stress I had ever experienced on the job and at home at the same simultaneous time, I was saved by two things, going to a therapist and also saved by the gym because
Mhm.
I would work out like if I had a particularly stressful day, then I would work out like a maniac and I would feel a little bit better. Eh, It's almost a guaranteed. Um, I know a you're a teacher. You're also a speaker. Would you ever consider being a coach as well and coaching people?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like the other half of Reed Training Solutions. Like the bulk of what I do is presentations, but the next level of that, and I do coaching in the sense of when I come to, say, a police organization, right, and I give a training, what I say is, listen, in 3 days, most of you are going to forget this information. In
Right,
7 days, you're not even going to remember my name.
right.
So, but what the only thing I can do, and when I come give presentations, like I'm pretty high energy, I have a lot of fun things we do. The only thing I can do in that instance is just light a spark. All I can do is spark. What I can do then is come back and I have this other program I do where it's a 4 month development program, it's 4 month coaching to really like hone in on those things. And then I can also do one-on-one coaching. I love coaching. That's like the presentations are great, but when I can work with somebody one-on-one, which I have done, and actually see that change, just like Monty did with me, right? Just like Monty and Amy, when they work with me, they change my mindset. I love being able to do that with other people. So yeah, for sure.
What's your greatest power today? And this is my fourth and penultimate question. What's your best ability? I know it's a tough question for some people.
Perseverance.
Perseverance.
Yeah. So for me, I went through an exercise where I wrote out my vision, right? I got very clear on what my vision is. And that took me a while, but I physically wrote it out. My wife and I did this separately. We wrote out our visions. We came together. Luckily, they're very much aligned, but I know what my vision is. And, it gets tweaked from time to time here and there, but I don't do things based on my emotions. I just know the path, and maybe I don't feel like doing it, but I know I can persevere through things. I've done a lot of difficult things. And again, this comes back to physical fitness as well. Like I've done an Ironman triathlon. A lot of people will think that's insane. Yeah. And
That's
if you don't know
incredible.
yeah, if you don't know what an Ironman is, it's 2.4 mile swim, It's 112 miles on the bike, and then a marathon, which is 26.2 miles. So the training that takes to get to that point where your body can go through that, well, that's how my mind is as well. And I think that's 100% my greatest like trait, characteristic, whatever you want to call it is. I can really endure quite a bit and persevere.
When you're training for an Ironman, this is off topic, but when you're training for that, what is a typical long run for you? Is that like, because I know people don't do a full marathon to train for a full marathon. Most people will do about 18, 15, 18 miles, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like when I was doing the Ironman stuff, like a long workout would be, I'm trying to think, it would be like on a Saturday, right? So it'd be like 85 miles on the bike and then a 10-mile run. That would be like a big day, right? That'd be like a big training day. Now the most I ever did in one training day, it was 100 miles on the bike, and then I think it was a 12-mile run. I think that was like my big, and that was probably 4 to 5 weeks out from the actual event. And that's
And how
just prepping your
long,
body.
how long did that take to do 100 miles and then a 10-mile run?
Quite a bit. I think that was probably upwards of like 11 hours, probably somewhere around there, if not a
Oh,
little bit more. So when I did the Ironman, and it was not a fast time. I think it took me 14 hours.
yeah.
So, but the swim's the easy part. The swim,
Yes.
it's 2.4 miles. It sounds like a lot, which it is, but that only took me an hour and 15 minutes, somewhere around there.
And it's also
So
the
every,
least taxing on the body because you're going through water.
yeah. Oh yeah. The most mentally draining is the bike. To this day, I think I have PTSD about riding a bike. It's just like it's it's a long time to be on the bike. And there's so many elements to it with hydration and nutrition and like going to the bathroom and like all these
Yes.
different things that you have to learn how to do. And then not to mention you go ride 112 miles and then you got to go run a marathon.
Yeah, oh my God. God bless you, man. That is an incredible feat that I don't ever aspire to. But I applaud anyone that has ever done that. That's just incredible. And my last question for you, just for fun, if you had a comic book superpower, what would it be and why?
Comic book superpower. I think just some kind of like super strength to where I could just pick stuff up and throw it. I don't know why that would be a really cool thing to do. You know why? Because my daughter thinks that like I'm the strongest person that's ever lived in the entire world. And I think it would be cool to actually be able to just do superhuman things like that.
Wouldn't it be cool if you could not look like you were that strong, but
Yeah.
you actually like you could just pick up a car by its fender with
Yes.
two fingers, right? And just hold it above your head. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah, I wouldn't have to do any of these speaking engagements. I wouldn't have to do any of this stuff. I would just go around and just put on a show.
That's incredible, Gene. I can't wait to meet you in person and do this again. Whenever I have a great interview, I always tell people that we'll do part two very soon, probably in the next 6 months or so. I know you have a lot going on, and I really, really appreciate the time. And I appreciate your service to our country and to your local town that you provide. You're an incredible human, and I love to give people their roses while they're still alive. And I really mean it sincerely that you are one of the most interesting men alive. That like you definitely check a lot of boxes of like being interesting and being a cool dude. And I can't wait to shake your hand. Thank you so much for coming on the show. All right, family. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Everyone I interview, I've chosen for you guys because of their story. And I hope that you get some value every single time. If you did get value or just simply enjoyed the episode, please share the episode with someone that you know. If you know of a guest, a frontline hero that has an amazing story, something uplifting or a positive message, hit me up in the contact form of www.davidleith.com or DM me at Instagram at David Leith, the number 1. Subscribe to the show because I have some really phenomenal guests coming up in the next few weeks that you definitely don't want to miss. All right, 1.